welcome to the Indigenous Nightmare podcast. It has been a very long time since I have made a video, but I have a special guest for you guys, someone who I've been working on trying to get on this podcast for a while, and that is in the form of Mr. Cornel West, currently right now running for President of the United States. Don't believe it's under the Green Party now, is it?
That's true. It's independent now. That's right.
It's independent now. And so I'm just going to jump right into the conversation that I feel we should be having is, I want to jump into kind of Landback, what that means for you and how that, aligns with your campaign. And so my first question would be, have you talked to any indigenous sovereign nations that have ushered in, some type of idea of what Landback is to them? And how that coincides with your campaign?
Absolutely. Well, one, I want to thank you so very much for taking the time to have me, though, brother. And I come to you in this dialogue with a spirit of deep humility, really to learn and listen. I've had very, very rich dialogues with a number of visionary and courageous indigenous brothers and sisters, and I don't think too many Afro-Indigenous. I think in that sense, you may be quite distinctive in that. Brother Nick Estes, and his work on the history of the future. I've had long dialogues with him in the last 2 months or so at the very beginning of the campaign, and I've tried to make it a priority, both in dialogues as well as in platform, to ensure that indigenous peoples are not in any way rendered invisible, that their suffering is not marginalized. So that because what sits at the center of this campaign or this moment in a movement, as it were, is how do you talk about decolonizing the American empire? I call it dismantling the American empire, but decolonizing it. And decolonizing it, one of the forms that it takes is the unleashing and proliferation of self-determination, beginning primarily with the brothers and sisters who have been involved in the 400-year war coming at them, psychically, socially, politically, economically, and the ways in which they've forged their own forms of armor, their own forms of counter-hegemony and countervailing stances given the bombardment of that war. And so one of the things I'm concerned about would be the Landback movement that you're talking about. I would take it, it's a particular form of self-determination that would not allow for markets, it wouldn't allow for corporate power, it wouldn't allow for nation states that are tied to settler colonial experiments coming from Europe in the New World, but it would not allow that to impede the self-determination of indigenous peoples. And the question would be, what form would that self-determination take? What kinds of visions, what kinds of wishes, what kinds of expressions of self-determination would be best manifest for the welfare of indigenous brothers and sisters? So that's the beginning. That's the beginning of a framework that I'm concerned about.
Well, thank you. And I wanted to bring something up. We have hedge funds that, own large portions of land, they own houses and stuff like that. When you say, basically being the head of an empire, that's what you're kind of going for right now, being the head of an empire to dismantle it.
That's right.
When I think of Landback, there are big businesses that own large plotages of land. I mean, we have an individual by the name of Bill Gates that owns large plotages of land in Arizona and Florida. Big business. Are you going to be making executive orders or steps that are going to outlaw this and make sure that they don't, on an international level, do this to any other indigenous nation, sovereign nation outside of the imperialist mode? Was that something that, a game plan that you're looking and striving for towards, actively dismantling corporations with, that deal with housing,
Absolutely.
and put people on the street, basically?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the concerns that I have is how do you democratize or nationalize not just industries and corporations, but the access to land such that everyday people are able to live lives of decency and dignity? See, so that what happens, I mean, you got a number of different forces going on here. You got demilitarizing the foreign policy. You've got decommodifying those industries tied to basic social needs, and that for me is oil, that's gas, that's pharmaceutical companies, and then the kind of land grab and power grab, the forms of gentrification, both within the urban centers, but also as it relates to indigenous brothers and sisters. How do you democratize that in such a way that the people who are there and the people who have been subjugated are able to actually flower and flourish? Now, all of these are questions that have detailed responses, not just one particular strategy is going to do it. But for me, it's a matter of being very clear about what the overarching decolonizing vision and analysis is going to be, and then see how you begin to work on strategies and tactics.
Okay. And
But
I think you made something. I think you made something very clear. For the last couple of years, people have been talking about what would be considered a universal income. I feel like we're at a stage now where this system is completely unsustainable. So no matter how much we are out there on picket lines fighting for $40 an hour, there always is going to be something that is going to counteract that and is going to make it to where it puts us right back in the same position that we were before. So my next question for you would be, do you believe in universal income? Is this something that is needed now for our people? Being the people under the American occupation, because this is an occupation, regardless if anybody states that it's a nation. No, it is an occupation. It was built off of the blood of my ancestors, and it was formulated under white supremacy, under the values of white supremacy. So again, my next question would be, how does universal income factor in into your campaign, and how that might help the people?
Well, it's because abolishing poverty across the board, that's in the hood, barrio, so-called reservation, poor white, it's across the board. It's a matter of universal applicability. But abolishing poverty with guaranteed income or a floor, so people have access to money, people have access to free healthcare, people have access to free education, people have access to free housing. That is one of the ways in which what you're calling universal income would be manifest. Universal income is just one moment in people having access to a variety of different resources and services and goods that they need in order to live a decent life. That's part of what it is to nationalize and democratize and socialize various industries. Now, I would still want to argue, my brother. You tell me what you think. That when we hit the picket line for the UAW workers, or when we hit the picket line for the healthcare workers, or hit the picket line for the railway workers, of course, Biden and company broke the back of that strike. I think those are still very necessary, because as long as you live in a capitalist society, class struggle is real, and people are suffering. And so even though, as you say, we started 15 for minimum wage and 20, 27 and so forth and so on. You're fighting for crumbs, you're fighting for concessions. There's no doubt. That's not revolution. That's not fundamental transformation, but it's still something that's required, because precious people who are workers who are being crushed by corporate greed have to be part and parcel of that class conflict and class struggle. And you have to make a choice which side you're on, so that this is a step-by-step process, as a historical process. But I think if you tell me if I'm right or wrong about this, but I hear you saying, well, even when you're out there, what you end up getting if you win is still something within the system that reproduces the same kind of relation to domination that you had before the strike. Is that a fair characterization?
Most definitely, because it goes back to what an elder of our time once said, John Henry Clark. How many of these dinner invitations are we going to continue to have? How many times are we going to sit down with our oppressors and give them even a minute to decide, oh, well, we could give you this, because you're fighting for it? No, I think we're at a stage now where people are too comfortable with going to negotiating tables with our oppressors instead of putting our foot down and making them really feel how it really should be felt. Now, if you ask me how things should be going, how revolutionary tactics should be implemented, people who work in the pharmaceutical companies, who work at pharmacies, make it to where people come in, get their medication, and they get to leave without paying anything, because that's how it should be. Radical, spontaneous action, I think, is what we don't have right now. And so, yeah, I do believe we are at a point where negotiating is no longer a viable tool. It can no longer be considered even a quantitative action towards qualitative change, because we consistently are going to the negotiating table with our oppressors and asking them for, like how you said, asking them for the crumbs, when really we should be asking them for the loaf. So that would be, my opinion, on the Writers Guild, on the UA workers and whatnot. How about we all come together and we put our foot down and say, no, we're no more negotiating tables, no more sitting down with our oppressors, no more sitting down with fascists. What we're going to do is we're going to do our picket lines. We're going to make sure that people are taken care of and whatnot, but we're not coming to you guys with anything that is of the sort negotiating. I don't want to negotiate with my oppressor. That would be my answer, or my opinion on what currently is going on right now, and how I feel it should be transformed into a more radical standing and footing on class struggle, on class solidarity, and making sure that individuals like boldly understand that we can no longer keep doing these tactics. These tactics are not feasible for our existence, because they continue and propel the white American mode of capitalism by saying, hey, we gave you $40 an hour, you should be comfortable now. No, under this system, there's no comfortability. Under the system, there's no comfortability. I'm an Afro-Indigenous man, and I know as soon as I walk outside, I have a target on my back. So that's
real. That's very real. But you can imagine, my dear brother, that the challenge for you would be, how do you either tease out or create a revolutionary wing that's organized of the working class, so that what you are saying is not just an aspiration, but it's something that it's an execution, that it actually can be done. Because what you take UAW workers, it's hard enough for Sean Fain and the others to convince those brothers and sisters and siblings to stay out there week after week after week. But the negotiations still going on, and the greedy bosses are still indifferent, and the ruling classes are still callous, as you rightly say. So that what you're calling for at the level of aspiration is a fundamental revolutionary movement coming out of the working class that pushes negotiation aside and says, it's like Jesus in the temple, just turn over the tables. We ain't asking for something on the table. Turn over the table and run the money changers out. That's got it crucified, but that's serious business, even though it was not a social movement. It was himself responding to this greediness, this avarice of these bosses in a religious temple. But in the Judaic temple and the Roman temple under Roman imperial powers, I should put it that way. It's called Herod's temple, right? It had been based on Solomon's temple that got destroyed. It's Herod's temple. The Roman Empire comes in, reshapes the temple, and as he says, transformed it from a house of prayer to a den of thieves. And so that is at an individualistic level, because he was just doing that as a individual. Disciples got scared. They didn't want to go in there with him. Too many Roman troops standing in front of the temple saying they're going to crush people. So the challenge for you would be, well, how does that become collective? How does that become organic to organize working class organizations so that it become actually revolutionary, like the League of Revolutionary Black Workers in Detroit, with General Baker and Darrell Mitchell and Ken Cockrell and Sheila Murphy in the 1960s. Break away from the UAW, say, we don't want to negotiate anymore. We want to overthrow the tables. We want to overthrow the boss. We want to overthrow capitalism. And that's precisely what they tried to do for a while. It was serious brothers and sisters there in Detroit. Different than the Black Panther Party, not really rooted in organized working class activity, but lumpen proletariat. They're much more in the Black community, concerned about the brothers and sisters on the block. They had a revolutionary vision that was really quite powerful and courageous, but it was more lumpen based on their particular reading of Franz Fanon. But the League of Revolutionary Black Workers of General Baker and Company becomes important. And then what happens to them? They then move into the Communist Labor Party with Nelson Perry. You know the story, you see. So you actually had the first all-Black or Black-led communist movement that was revolutionary in substance and in context in relation to organized Black workers. When I talk about just brothers and sisters on the block who lumpen, who actually don't have jobs, or if they do have jobs, it's a come and go kind of thing, but they were there in the Ford plant. This is, again, the 60s. Situation is very different now in terms of the deindustrialization that set in after that. But in a way, is it fair to say that for you, the League of Revolutionary Black Workers or the League of Afro-Indigenous Workers would be closer to your tradition? Is that fair?
I mean, I'm a Pan-Africanist. I'm also a decolonial Marxist, so I see things in a different limelight. I see radical movements to be radical, and what I see now are movements based in what I consider neoliberal aesthetics. They have neoliberal aesthetics to them. So that's why I say, there does need to be more of a radical approach to getting what we feel we deserve. So I mean, yeah, I would say you're kind of spot on there. Is that I'm more on the radical tip. I'm more on I don't want crumbs. I want the loaf.
Right.
That's have,
That's right.
So yeah.
Absolutely.
I would like to gravitate this conversation towards Cop City, if you'd like.
Yes.
We have cop cities being built all over this occupation right now. The one that's most popular, most well known, is the one in Atlanta. So I'd like to get your thoughts on the current climate that's in Atlanta, how Atlanta has basically given the people no say so and if they want this or not. But this is also an example of what defunding the police looks like under under this American mode. Is we're not going to defund them. We're just going to give them a big playground to work with so that eventually, it'll change some things in our neighborhood. But really, having a grenade launcher range is not something that we need. Having firing ranges, helicopter pads, all of these things are not needed for our community. What's needed is education. What's needed is healthcare. What's needed is food and refrigerators, lights on, rent paid. All of these things that Atlanta is disregarding. They feel it's not needed, but more cops are. So I'd love to get your thoughts on how this is not just in Atlanta. We now have one in Baltimore, and I do have a list of other cities that are literally getting ready to negotiate with fascists that have money, that are going to funnel that into creating basically terror schools. They're schools that are created to inflict terror onto our community in the hands of the police. So
absolutely. No, I think that because, again, I always link domestic policy with foreign policy. The imperial policy abroad, which is militarism on steroids, and the relation to the militarization taking place in the United States. It could be militarized schools. So many schools in Black communities have more police than they have nurses or counselors. The militarization of the streets. Sometimes it's citizen to citizen with the guns and so forth. Other times it's citizens who are police, vis-a-vis citizens who are not police. And then the white supremacy is always shot through it. I mean, it's just a given in the history of a racialized capitalist society that we live in. So when we look at Atlanta, it's very important to connect it to the goon squads that I was just in Mississippi with brother Malik Shabazz and Trent Butler, the lawyers who actually found the Jenkins and Parker brothers with the bullet through the neck and the tongue, and you know the story. And those goon squads are all around the country. Every major police department has its own kind of goon squad. And as we know, those goon squads are multiracial. Black police, brown police, white police. It's still under the aegis of white supremacy. It's still under the aegis of a culture of silence, so that the police who are not members of the goon squad will not say a mumbling word about it, because the goon squads are integral in trying to suppress and contain, especially the Black working class and poor sections of town. And they have very different attitudes toward the white sections of town that are upper middle class and ruling class. And so it's part of a whole system that's not just domestic, but international. That's why it's part of the struggle of shutting down Cop City in Atlanta has to do with the relation of that militarization to Israeli defense forces, other police forces in other parts of the world that are trying to suppress poor and working people. That kind of international analysis, I think, is crucial, even as we try to, as I was saying before, demilitarize imperial policy abroad and the intra-imperial policy within the United States. Because I mean, the relation of European settler societies and indigenous peoples is imperial too. It's as imperial as anything outside the borders of the United States. And so in that regard, you know, we also want to keep in mind what you noted rightly so, the role of Black neoliberal leadership with the mayors and those who voted in city council, disproportionately Black, supporting Cop City, because Black neoliberal leadership has played a fundamental role in enabling the militarization internally in the country, and also enabling the militarization outside the country. They don't say a word about AFRICOM. They don't say a word about opposition to occupation of Haiti. They don't say a word about Ukraine. They don't say a word about the Israeli Defense Forces enacting the vicious war of occupation against Palestinians and so on. And so we just have to try to be consistent ideologically, morally, spiritually, and so forth, to keep track of these structures of domination that lose sight of the precious humanity of Black folk, indigenous folk, brown folk, and in the end, poor white workers. They don't have the same racial experience, but they are still exploited. They are still subjugated. And as you know, that what is about 1,100 fellow citizens they keep track of, the Washington Post keep track of, who are actually killed by police. And about a good 35% of those are Black and brown folk and indigenous folk. But you got a significant number of white folk who are shot down by the police too. And they don't come from the upper class at all. Not at all.
Yeah, we have like people like Killer Mike, who commented on Cop City. You know,
what did Brother Killer Mike say? I missed
basically stating that when this system has $100 million invested into something, there's no way we can try and dismantle it, which I feel is chicken shit.
He said that. He said that, huh?
Killer Mike said that. Killer Mike, wow. Someone who I've known through my life to be one of the most radical rappers that are out there.
Oh, well, you know, he was on my third album, man.
So I find it very funny that a man like that who grew up in what would be considered Atlanta's upper, Black upper class, comes from wealth, generational wealth. I find it very funny that he says that, because it ideologically doesn't match what he is, or what he perceives, what people perceive him to be. So, when I hear people that say, oh, well, we can't stop Cop City, we can't do this because there's too much money involved, that is an out-of-pocket way of thinking, because what you've done from the start is conformed yourself into believing that there is no hope for our people. There is no hope for change. There is no hope for any type of revolutionary standing in this country, in this occupation. And so when I hear people like Killer Mike talk, I tune out now, because you guys are protecting your pockets. You're protecting the millions that you have, that $5 million net worth. That's what they're protecting. His new album's coming out, so it's like protecting his new album. He doesn't want to be associated with true radicals, and that is a conformist. That is someone who plays radical, but when in person, you're right there, if right there accepting every bid in the book, to defraud your own people. So those would be my comments on Cornel West, on not Cornel West, on Killer Mike. But I'd like to get your thoughts, on
No, this is the first time
that.
I heard of that. I have a deep love and respect for Brother Killer Mike. I mentioned before, we did a record together on Never Forget,
Mhm.
the revolutionary record with Dead President. So I mean, and Dead President is about as revolutionary hip hop as you can get, like Immortal Technique or something like that. I mean, you're talking about some serious left analysis among high quality artists. So I didn't know what Killer Mike had made that comment and so forth. But if that, and I trust you, of course, that him saying something like that, I would have a strong critique, because one can never say to oppressed peoples that there is no alternative other than the status quo. You can never say, because there's so much money invested, that we can't do X or we can't do Y. I mean, if that were the case, then there'd be no Nat Turners, there'd be no Harriet Tubmans, there'd be no Frederick Douglasses, there'd be no Ida B. Wells Barnett's, there'd be no Malcolms or Martins, because a whole lot of power and money and resources invested in American apartheid when Rosa Parks began spark the movement with Emmett Till on her mind, as we know, when she sat down on that bus and on to stand up for justice, she had Emmett Till on her mind. But I think we always have to have what the great Edward Said called an unstoppable predilection for alternatives over against unjust status quos. That is a fundamental requirement for any serious revolutionary or radical or any person with a deep commitment to change, fundamental change. And so, if you're telling people who are out there getting killed, we got one brother Emmanuel's already been murdered, right? He's been killed. They're trying to stop Cop City. And he was an activist in the mode of not just critique of militarization, but also an environmental activist, because as we know, it has ecological catastrophic effects in terms of what it means to go into that South Forest and completely transform the land and transform what indigenous peoples have understood to be very much a sacred relation, an I-thou relation with the land and human beings, completely shattered, crushed in the name of guns, cannon, military equipment, supposedly to protect the poor and working classes. But the military practices under conditions of grotesque wealth inequality and capitalist processes tends to be very much as I said, mechanisms of suppression and mechanisms of containment of poor Black people.
Yeah, and I think you did bring up Torgita, who just recently the district attorney deemed it reasonable. His death was reasonable. What are your thoughts on that? The district attorney basically deeming a man who had no weapon, drew no weapon, was a peaceful person, was there fighting for the rights of all people to not be subjugated by police brutality. What are your thoughts on the district attorney basically stating that this man's life needed to be taken? It was reasonable for them to take his life.
Well, it's just another lie. It's just another lie to hide a crime. It's just another form of mendacity to conceal criminality. And we just have to be very clear about that. Now, we know that's nothing new. It's powers that be been lying for hundreds of years that try to cover up what the reality is. And given which, because I didn't even see, I'm so far behind, brother. You teaching me and instructing me in some wonderful ways, because I didn't even know that they said that about Brother Emmanuel. DA, they ought to be ashamed of themselves. But that's a chronic pattern of behavior. We know that. It happens over and over and over and over again. We got police with under cameras who's shooting folk in the back over and over again, and they come up with a reasonable X, Y, and Z. So we in some sense, we're not surprised, but we should still be morally outraged and have a righteous indignation against that, because those are just lies.
I want to go back in time a little bit. You were a part of a group of individuals that were talking about the issues amongst Black communities in America. And one of the individuals that was on this panel was Sister Soldier, someone who I admire deeply. Someone who I feel even then was speaking about the inequitable organizations, tactics, aesthetics that we had back then that people stated were good for Black people, good for marginalized people. I feel those words, and I'm speaking of that conversation that you guys had, which was very, in my opinion, was very argumentative. Everybody was trying to get their opinion out and overtake what someone said or some form of rebuttal. And I want to get your thoughts on, Sister Soldier made some very strong points that I think today are very relevant. They're very relevant. And so I'd like to get your thoughts on, was Sister Soldier wrong for saying what she said, for being as bold as she was, being on a panel that was predominantly white, having individuals that come from white communities saying, well, I worked in the Black community, so I know a little bit about, what this is, and I can tell you that things have changed. And it's like creating false narratives and her having to combat that on a stage where only maybe 1 out of the 8 people that were there were really truly in defense of what she was saying and really understood it. I would love to get your thoughts on, was she right, for sticking and standing up the way that she did, and how that even today is very relevant. It's very, very relevant. Every single word that she stated is very true. We have no organization that's out there, I personally feel, that is in every single city that has a Black community that's being impoverished, like Sand Branch, Texas, like Flint, Michigan, like Jackson, Mississippi. Now we have New Orleans. They have a water crisis. It's unsustainable. They're drinking seawater right now. So what are your thoughts on, do you feel that she was correct, in standing and sticking up for herself against, a panel of men that literally berated her for talking about our community in a way that people feel uncomfortable because it's true. We don't have the tools needed, I feel, right now to fix what's going on, because we're too caught up in wanting to have some form of class solidarity without realizing that we have our own people that are scattered away. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Now, as I recall, though, brother, that must have been in about 1991, 1992. she was still working with the great Chuck D at that time. She was part of PE, a part of Public Enemy. Public Enemy, at that historical moment, was probably the greatest prophetic artistic group of that time. And again, I mentioned Dead Press and the others have always been consistent revolutionaries, but Public Enemy had a popularity that Dead Press didn't have. And so she was working very close with Flavor Flav and who was it, Professor, what's his name, Professor? You know the brother I'm talking about, Public Enemy. They had three of Grimm, Professor Grimm, Flavor Flav, and Public Enemy, and she was a woman. And I love what she had to say. I mean, she and I were on the panel together. She made a comment about Bill Clinton and how Bill Clinton had gone at Jesse Jackson at an NAACP meeting, and they said that he had sister soldiered. He had been sister soldiered because Sister Soldier herself had spoke out against the more mainstream middle class, petty bourgeois, liberal Black leadership. And I think that was very, very important. I was blessed to write blurbs on her book in support of her in that regard, very much so. But I would have to go back and listen to all the different things that she said. She said a number of things, it just wasn't one thing. But it was an attempt to hold up the desirable militant wing of the Black freedom struggle so that it doesn't become so sanitized and mainstreamed and streamlined. And I love that about her work. And she was making the shift, as you recall, to becoming a novelist. Because 2 years later, she came out with her first novel. And then ever since, she's come out with novels almost every 2 or 3 years. I can't keep up with her. She's so prolific. But that kind of militant wing of the Black freedom struggle is crucial. And she's been a very important figure.
Now kind of getting into your campaign, the last little bit of this interview.
Sure.
You first were part of the People's Party and then gravitated towards the Green Party. And now you're an independent. And I want to talk about two things that have happened recently.
Sure.
One being Peter Daou, your campaign manager. I would love to get some insight on what made you choose this individual. Now you're getting a lot of heat. I don't know if you know for choosing this man because a lot of people feel like he's aligned with white liberal aesthetics and is only here to circumvent any type of voters towards the DNC. So my first question is, why Peter Daou? And the second one would be why now under the independent circle? What gravitated you towards that?
Mm-hmm. No, you see, Brother Peter, he's Lebanese, as you know. He's not a white brother. He's from the Middle East. And he has a history of ideological movement. A lot of people will remember him when he was very much a part of the Democratic Party machine. And that was neoliberalism core. He had deep loyalties to Hillary and so forth. And of course, so many of us on the left were going at Hillary tooth and nail with her war, militarism, with her corporatism and her ties to Wall Street and so forth. And then he makes a radical break 7 years ago to become very much supporter of Green, works very closely with Jill Stein. And as you know, Jill Stein was interim campaign manager for a number of months for my campaign. And she made the recommendation that Peter be campaign manager because of his tremendous skills and because of the break that he made. Now, a lot of people, would argue, well, we're not convinced that break is a real one. Peter Daou, we remember it was Daou who was going at Bernie in the name of Hillary Clinton. And now he's an independent leftist, been an independent leftist for 7 years. And so I was very glad to get someone who has both the level of skills that he has and also who has this ideological break, and he recognizes that, I make the decision, that it's my campaign. We have consultation, we learn from each other, converse, but I make the ultimate decision. So people say, well, Brother West is going to move to the center or move to the right. Then check out what I'm doing. Check out what I'm saying. Look at my platform. Look at what speeches I give. Look at what organizations I'm working with Cold Pink. I mean, we got all kinds of anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist activities going on. That doesn't strike one as being centrist in any way, a neoliberal, or being hijacked by the rot of the Democratic neoliberal party, not at all. So you got a lot of people who are just saying things without a whole lot of evidence because they have suspicions. And those suspicions are, he was once this, he was once that. And they're right, he was once a neoliberal and Democratic party. He's changed consistently over the 7 years. And I think anybody who looks at his record and his praxis understands that. Now, the reason why I made the move to independent is because the Green Party, especially Jill Stein and John Baraka, who would come to my rescue, in some ways beckoned by Chris Hedges. So he was the one who really suggested making that move to the Greens, because of ballot access especially. And when I made that move, I was very appreciative. I shall forever be appreciative for the transition. Once I made the move, there was so many internal dynamics of the party and all the different kind of requirements. You got to go to so many state gatherings. You got 4 debates within the Green Party. You got 7 other people running. And because we're a limited campaign in terms of resources, we're a tremendous campaign in terms of ideas, vision, courage, energy, and so forth. Ain't no doubt about that. But we still broke as the 10 commandments financially, that I'd end up spending so much time with the internal party dynamics, I couldn't get to the people. I couldn't get to the suffering and the issues, and trying to be there on the ground, in the streets, on the corners, in the alleys, in the church, mosques, synagogues, temples, nightclubs. I mean, you got to be where the people are. And that was part of my challenge in the Green Party. The Green Party is not a party that's rooted in the masses of the people. It's been a very important third party on the left, but so much of what I focus on really is not organically connected to the Green Party. Put it that way. And so I got freed up. And as you know, I've always considered myself a revolutionary jazz man. It's hard to be a jazz man playing in a party band. It's hard to be a jazz man playing in even a military band. You can only play for so long. It's too tight. It's too many constraints. Now the challenge is going to be, when we've got field operations, to make sure that I have ballot access in at least 35 states. Now with the Green Party, we could probably end up getting about 43 or 44. I think Jill had about 47 when she ran. God bless her. So that is a challenge, but it does free me up.
So going independent, basically, he's kind of giving you more time to be with the people rather than play like you're for the people. You play like you're for and with the people under the Green Party, is what you're saying.
Well, I would never say play, because whatever party I'm with, I'm going to be focused on the people. It's just that I only have so much time. And when you also have all these different Green Party requirements, then you only have so much time to be able to do what you really want to do. I mean, I don't mind spending time with the Green Party because, they fellow citizens, and these are serious progressives in their own right, but they still have too many internal struggles going on. And I've never been a Green Party person, so I'm coming in from the outside. You see what I mean?
Yeah, I voted for Howie Hawkins back in 2020. when he was running for president. That was actually the last time I think I ever voted. But I want to
how is a decent brother? He's been at it for a long time. I've had wonderful conversations with him. We have strong debates on Ukraine, as you can imagine. But I've had conversations with him on a number of different issues. Mm-hmm.
My last question for you would be, where do you see your campaign going, and do you honestly feel like you have a strong chance of beating like a MAGA Trump, you know, a Biden Harris, or any of the individuals that are out there that are running? Do you feel like you have a strong enough chance to actually beat these individuals in an independent arena?
I think history very much unpredictable. I'm not even sure that Biden and Trump will be the candidates for the rotten two parties. I really don't. I think Biden might run out of gas. I really do. I think the Hunter Biden case could be too much for him. I think Trump, he thinks that he can sustain it, but with these 4 major indictments and 91 felonies coming at him, there's a good chance that both of those folks would not be the candidates. Our job is to be consistent, to bear witness, to get our troops in place, to sustain, create and sustain our infrastructures, and go till the end. We're going all the way to November. We're going to be consistent all the way through. And if whatever the polls say now, let the polls say what they say. We're going to be consistent. We're going to tell the truth about the plight of poor working people here and around the world. We're going to tell the truth about American imperialism. We're going to tell the truth about corporate greed. We're going to tell the truth about the need for abolition of poverty and homelessness. We're going to tell the truth about the nationalization of fossil fuels so that private profit is not put over the needs of the people and the planet. We're going to tell the truth about indigenous peoples being crucial, integral to any conception of the future of this country, this empire. And that the blowback against the empire begins with the acknowledgement of the genocidal attacks on indigenous people, the affirmation of their humanity. Then it moves to the enslaved Africans. Then it moves to the Mexicans, who half of their nation was stolen. So you got stolen land tied to genocide in terms of indigenous people. You got stolen labor with Africans. You got stolen land with Mexicans in 1846. Those are truths that cannot be.
Are you talking about when America took control over Mexico?
50% of Mexico, which is California.
Then I would love to correct you, because I feel like people get too caught up and conflated in Mexico, quote unquote, owning parts of California. They only owned it for 29 years. Indigenous people.
That's a long time now. Indigenous people have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years.
Indigenous people, particularly my people, I could say, went through 3 forms of genocide, went through 3, or under the 3rd form of occupation right now. We went through it under the Spanish, we went through it under the Mexico rancho systems, and now we're under the American imperialist mode. So I would push back on that that Mexico had land that was stolen from them. It was never their land to begin with. That was a myth. No, these are names, these are national settler states that we need to have contradictions about.
But we have to draw a distinction, though, my dear brother. You tell me what you think here. We got to draw a distinction between what is immoral and illegal, which is what Mexico did to indigenous people. There's no doubt about that. But in terms of sheer power, the Mexican state did have that land by means of illegal and immoral means. And the war that took place between the Mexican state and the US state resulted in the US gaining access to the land that Mexico had illegally and immorally gained access to by attacking and assaulting indigenous peoples. So that history is never just a history of what is moral and what's legal. We know that right now, right? It's a history of the morality and legality being subordinate to sheer power of nation states And when the Mexican nation state was attacked by the US nation state, and 50% of the land that the Mexican nation state had illegally and immorally taken from indigenous peoples was taken from Mexico, that became part of the US settler colonial project. That's the point I'm making.
Okay. And I just wanted it
does
to,
that make sense? You see
no, yeah, I just wanted it to be
I'm
clear,
embracing
that,
and acknowledging your correction.
Yeah. People conflate when people hear Azatlan, that's a eugenics, it's a eugenics term. It's riddled in eugenics,
Right.
settler nationalism. And so, I had to correct that, because I mean, when we have these conversations about, land back, or like how you said, illegal or immoral rights or tactics or anything of the sort, we have to factor in that indigenous people have never been put in a position to say, well, what do you want? We've always been asked to come to a table, rather than, why don't you come to our table? Why don't you sit down and ask us what we want with the land that you guys occupy? So I just had to correct that.
No, I hear you. I hear you. I'm with you on that. I'm with you on that. But part of my point was, because I'm trying to keep track of the imperial policies of the US settler colonial experiment, that immoral, illegal, stolen land, stolen labor, and so forth and so on, that one of the means by which they were able to extend was 1846, where Mexico had already engaged in its vicious attacks and stolen the land from the indigenous folk.
Mr. West, I want to thank you for sharing, your time and your energy with me. There were some things we didn't get to talk about.
No, we'll get a chance to come back. We'll get a chance to come back.
Yeah, so if we can, I'd love to schedule for a second part to this, because I didn't get to ask you about Jimmy Dore. I didn't get to ask you about a lot of things that have happened over the past couple months regarding your campaign. I really wanted to get your thoughts on Ukraine and Palestine and whatnot. So yeah, I'd love to.
I think you know where I stand on Ukraine and Palestine and the vicious Israeli occupation. And Brother Doris talk about, well, you shouldn't talk about white supremacy too much because you might alienate some of the Trumpites and some of the folk as part of his social base. He said, no, Brother Jimmy, I'm going to be with you with the workers no matter what, but I will never in a million years remain silent about vicious legacies of white supremacy vis-a-vis indigenous peoples, Black people, brown peoples, or what have you. And at that point, what I just told him, we just have deep disagreements, man. In some ways, we live in different worlds. So when we overlap, but when we don't, we don't. And I'm just very honest and candid about that. Now, on the other hand, I don't have a moment to be disrespected by anybody, let alone a white brother. So I'm not putting up with that ever. And that was another. I call
a spade a spade. I call a spade a spade. And so he's a fascist, in my opinion. He is nowhere near where I feel we should be calling him a brother or anything like that, because when you go out there and you ideologically want to say that white supremacy is not a problem, but the working class is an even bigger issue, I don't know what you're smoking, but you need to stop, because that's the type of idea I get of him, is that you don't give a shit. And I'm going to be very frank, you don't give a shit about Black people by saying, oh, well, we need to stop worrying about white supremacy. No, that's what a fascist will tell you. A fascist will tell you the race isn't an issue. What it is the class. The class struggle is the issue. No, white supremacy, i.e. capitalism, is the issue. Always has been.
And the two are so tied together.
Racism and capitalism cannot live without each other. They are intertwined in ways that we haven't even fathomed yet. We only have seen the face of it.
I believe it is. And we know that from John Henry Clark and all the other towering figures who wrestled with this issue, and so many, C.L.R. James, we can go on and on and on. And of course, I didn't get a chance to get into that. You take a towering figure like Gerald Horne, all you got to do is just pick up any text of his, and you understand that, Jimmy Dore.
He's been on the show.
Have you had Brother Gerald on the show?
I've had Gerald Horn. He's going to be probably on in the next couple of months. I'm probably going to be scheduling another interview with him. I wanted some time to read his newest book to have him on to discuss that. But yeah, that I think me and you, when it comes to Jimmy Dore, might have some differences of opinions, only because I feel like he is a friend of yours.
But no, I've never met him.
So you've never met Jimmy Dore?
Oh no, I never met Jimmy Dore in person. No, I've been on the show once or twice, and that's it.
Okay.
That's it. No, I've never met him. I never broke bread with him or nothing like that. Not at all. Not at all. Definitely. I mean, for me, part of the surprise was that some of the black podcasters who I didn't know had relations with Jimmy Dore, you know, they tended to very much side with Jimmy Dore over against me. I was very surprised at that because I thought that they knew that they almost had an instinctive response of disrespect of a black man or white supremacist sensibility that seemed to be operating either consciously or unconsciously. And they, with them making that so secondary and tertiary, I was thinking, hey, how they gonna be a black revolutionary inside with somebody who say you can't say too much about white supremacy? That don't make no sense to me at all. So I had to rethink where they were coming from. Well, it turned out they were very close to him and he helped facilitate their careers. I said, oh, so y'all got a Marxist analysis of everything but yourself. That don't make no sense. You can't have a Marxist analysis of everything but yourself in terms of your own career. And
I have a strong feeling of who you're talking about, but I try to stay on the lines of.
But what was your take on it? How you understand that?
This is my take on people who align with Jimmy Dore.
Yeah, exactly. Just we wanted to go in names, but
are you really serious about radical change, or are you serious about clickbait? Are you serious about getting the biggest name that you possibly can on your podcast, you know, to propel you into what you think is a radical level of revolutionary thought and theory? I can tell you this right now. I didn't message you because I wanted your name on my podcast so that I could get thousands. So I want to thoughtfully have these conversations. I would love to sit down with people and have these tough conversations, have these dialectical conversations for which we put ourselves in a position to feel uncomfortable. We shouldn't be feeling comfortable under the system at all.
I hear you, my brother. Definitely, but I can tell you this. It has been a joy and a blessing to be in conversation with you, though, man, because I learn, I listen, I'm pushed, I'm unsettled, I'm challenged, and I can just feel you the real thing, and that to me is the most important thing. You know what I mean?
Well, I appreciate that.
There's a difference between saying what you mean and meaning what you say versus posing and posturing and thinking that you're just playing a game with some market opportunities and some opportunistic proclivities. That's a whole different thing. And that's very much, you know, what so much of the professional managerial phenomena is all about. You know, it's just make the market strategy, your next move. You want eyeballs. You want this next career move and so forth. And see, the revolutionaries, that kind of conformity, that kind of marketeering is the most dangerous thing for any serious revolution.
Yeah, it's kind of revolutionary.
You'll sell out in a minute. You'll sell out in a second. Or another way of putting it, as we put it in the hood, is you're still on the plantation. You're not a free person. You're not a free man. You're not a free woman. You're still on somebody's plantation. You got to get more Nat Turner and Harriet Tubman in you.
I think Du Bois said it right. We were freed from our shackles. We're in the sun for a little bit and got right back into it.
That's Black Reconstruction, beginning of Black Reconstruction, 1935. So absolutely right. But okay, my brother, thank you so much, man. I get to this next one here.
No problem.
Salute you. Stay strong, though, man.